So as BJ said, my name is Carl Dietrich. I'm the CEO and Chief Technical Officer at Terrafugia. I'm one of the co-founders of the company. Terrafugia, the name itself, comes from the Latin terra meaning earth, and fugia from the base of the fugitive, fugere, to flee or escape. So Terrafugia's goal is really to help society flee or escape the earth. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by bringing what's been called the first practical flying car to the general aviation marketplace. The image up on the screen is Terrafugia's production prototype of our transition vehicle. This is a vehicle that can fly and drive on the road and convert between the two modes in about 20 seconds. So one of the questions that I get a lot from folks outside the aerospace world is, why should we develop a flying car? You know, what good is this going to do for society? One of the questions that I have, well, could this be the next step in the mobilization of society? Back in the 1800s, everybody got around on horse and buggy, or they walked. The automobile came into existence, and we saw a vast change in how society gets around at large. The plane came into existence, and it's had a huge impact on the commercial side of the world, but it's not really a great tool for personal use today. And so I think one of the visions that we have at Terrafugia, one of the visions that we've shared with earlier pioneers who have tried to do something like develop a flying car, is to really mobilize society, take advantage of that third dimension, all the classic arguments. This has been tried many times before over the past 100 years. And in fact, one of the most famous attempts, this one here, by a gentleman named Molt Taylor. He developed the Aerocar company, and this was the last concept that came the closest to getting into production. This was certified by the CAA, the precursor to the FAA, in 1956. It's been a long time since then. Lots of things have changed. But the need now is actually greater than it ever has been before. Back in the mid-60s, Molt had over 250 orders for his vehicle. And had his business plan been structured a little bit differently, we might have more of these Aerocars flying around today. As it is, 5 were built, and only one of them is still flying. But we have an opportunity here to have a significant impact on society, much bigger than we did back in Molt's day. According to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, there are actually over 3 million people in the United States who qualify as stretch commuters. These are people who drive more than 50 miles to get to work. So they're commuting, they're spending on average 2 hours in their car every day, at least. That's 1% of the population of the United States. That's actually a really substantial number. There's really a huge potential here for general aviation, for light aircraft, to have a significant impact on the lives of these commuters. So why aren't we seeing that happen? Why do we only have 600,000 active pilots in the United States today? Well, there are some big problems that... How many of you are pilots in the room? Okay, so a pretty good number. So there are some big problems that pilots are familiar with, that non-pilots are less familiar with, that inhibit the use of general aviation for this sort of longer distance commuting. They're represented here by these graphics here. The biggest problem that pilots face is weather sensitivity. Light aircraft are just fundamentally more sensitive to weather than commercial airliners. For that reason, you fly somewhere, the weather changes on you, and you could get stuck. You might have to rent a car to get home, have to go back, pick up your airplane at another time. It's very inconvenient if you can't count on your mode of personal transportation to get where you want to go and get home. The next big reason, owning and operating an aircraft is a very expensive proposition today. It's something that really has reserved it for in many cases, the upper echelons of society, because the continued cost of airworthiness, the cost of maintenance, the cost of insurance, the cost of fuel, the cost of keeping your major investment in aircraft protected when the weather gets lousy in a hangar, all of those costs add up quite significantly, and pilots identify that as also one of the biggest obstacles to the more widespread use of general aviation. The next one is long door-to-door travel time, because while the aircraft may fly twice as fast or more than you can drive, pilots wind up spending on average between a half hour and 45 minutes stopped on the ground at the airport on either end of their trip. When you tack on that hour plus of being stationary, it really reduces your average travel speed door to door. And that's a big problem. If it's kind of flaky because you can't really count on it because of the weather, it's expensive, and it's not really that much faster door to door than driving. And oh, by the way, if you go to a different airport because you diverted somewhere because of weather, that different airport may not have any ground transportation. They might have a courtesy car, maybe, that you can borrow. That's a big problem as well. So pilots identified these as their 4 biggest problems, and the 4 things that keep the wider population from being able to benefit from this network of 5,000 public use airports around the country. This is our nation's largest underutilized transportation resource. Most of these airports maybe have only a few dozen flight operations per day, but nowhere near capacity. So what can we do? Well, we're trying to develop a vehicle that directly addresses every one of those major problems. From the weather sensitivity standpoint, a vehicle that can fold up its wings and drive down the road and park in your single-car garage addresses every one of the problems from the weather sensitivity. When the weather gets bad, you land, you drive. The ownership costs, you don't have to rent a hangar for this aircraft, you keep it at home in your garage. It burns super unleaded automotive gasoline, which is about 35% less expensive than aviation fuel. It's better for the environment as well. Because it only takes 20 seconds to convert between modes, you spend less time stopped on the ground at the airport and more time going where you want to go. And that more than makes up for the performance compromises that you inherently have to make when you incorporate 2 disparate modes of transportation. Finally, transportation on the ground is no longer an issue. At any of those 5,000 airports, it doesn't matter if they have a rental car counter. It doesn't matter if there's a cab stand. It doesn't matter if somebody else borrowed the courtesy car already. You've got your wheels wherever you go. So the transition is the only product on the market that really takes on every one of the 4 largest obstacles to the more widespread use of general aviation. It's a 2-seat light sport aircraft. The light sport aircraft opportunity was really the catalyst for the creation of Terrafugia, because the regulatory change really enabled an investment in this sort of venture to make potential financial sense. And we're able to do something, make a product that fits in this category, that drives like a normal car on the road, can do highway speed, 65 miles an hour, getting pretty good gas mileage, over 35 miles to the gallon, burning unleaded automotive fuel, and drives just like a normal car. You know, steering wheel, gas pedal, and brake pedal, just like an automatic transmission car. Also flies like a normal plane. So you've got a stick, rudder pedals, center console throttle, 100 miles an hour in the air, burning about 5 gallons per hour. And with that, with a 23-gallon tank, you're going to fly over 400 miles. So we're able to bring a product to market that has the potential to address this segment of transportation between about 100 miles and 500 miles that right now GA could serve, but the cost of how much you have to value your time is pretty high compared to what most of the population values their time at. This model, actually, we put this together when we were putting together our business plan, and this helped us quantify the potential value of a product like the Transition. When we include the Transition into this model of economics, in terms of what your most economical transportation option is, it winds up pushing down the threshold from your low-cost general aviation alternatives to the Transition. Now, we're not all the way down to where cars need to be and where you really have to be in order to have a really broad-based transportation revolution, but we're taking a very positive step in that direction of making something that is more broad-based, something that is the first step in the direction of what everybody's vision has been of a pop culture flying car. And that's really fundamentally exciting. So we take our proof of concept vehicle out to many different shows, and we share it with the public whenever we can. And there's something about the idea of actually having a practical flying car that resonates with people. It's kind of been ingrained in our pop culture for decades now, and nobody's ever made one. Why not? Why hasn't this happened? What happened to Molt Taylor's Aero car? Why didn't that work? Being able to answer those questions and show people a practical path, the way we can get from where we are today, with today's existing infrastructure, with the current regulatory structure that's in place right now, and the current size of the general aviation market, and take a real and tangible step in the direction of the vision of the flying car of the future, the Jetsons. That's fundamentally inspiring. It excites a lot of people. And we're going out and we're exciting new pilots, people who never thought about general aviation before, who, in fact, this is a great example of one. Mark here. Mark actually saw a news story about Terrafugia about 2 years ago. And he had never considered becoming a pilot before. He'd never considered general aviation. He saw this story on us and thought, wow, is this for real? Is it actually a flying car? Poked around on our website, got more and more curious, came down and visited us. By the end of his visit, I think he had bought out our company store here. And he put a deposit down for a vehicle. He didn't even have a pilot's license. About 9 months ago, he sent me this picture. This is Mark holding his new pilot certificate. So we're really, really happy. I get very inspired when I see that sort of story, because our industry at large the pilot population has been gradually decreasing for the past 30 years. So if a concept like this has the ability to get out there and inspire people to think about general aviation who never thought about it before, that's fantastic. And we need to keep working in that direction. All of us need to keep working in that direction for the benefit of our industry. And because of that, Terrafugia has wound up becoming, in many respects, an ambassador for general aviation to the rest of the world. As we like to say, flying cars sell magazines. Popular Science, right? Who's not seen a Popular Science magazine with a picture of a flying car on the front? The media recognize that it captures the public's imagination. And consequently, we've received a tremendous amount of media attention. And that gives us a platform from which to talk about the potential benefits of becoming a pilot. Here's what you could do. Here's what your life could be like. Imagine if you had a flying car in your driveway. What would your neighbors say? It really is exciting, and it gets people thinking outside the box in a way that they really never have before. And so with that, and I think I've lost my clickability here. All right. That's fine. So one of the questions that we got a lot is it really a flying car? Isn't it really more of an airplane that can fold up its wings and drive? And yeah, from a pilot's perspective, yeah, that's probably an accurate way of describing it. It's an airplane that has the added capability of folding up its wings, driving down the road, and parking in your single-car garage. But it's really what it does that matters. It doesn't really matter what we call it. Is it a flying car? Is it a driving airplane? It doesn't really matter. If it gets out there, it's going to be the only product out there that fundamentally addresses the four statistically largest obstacles to the more widespread use of general aviation. And in the process, we're going to be setting, by far, the highest standards in the industry for safety, convenience, and fun in personal aviation. The transition, because it has to fold up its wings, drive down the road, it has to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards. So the vehicle really does set the highest bar, by far, in the industry for safety, for convenience, and for fun. And that's something that also has a huge potential to excite. So with that, I wanted to wrap up, and wrap up a little early, and maybe we can do a little Q&A, because I know we talked about that before. What do you think, Jim?
Sure, we have 3 minutes, and if you guys want to hear any stories, another question, okay.
Any questions that, yes, Rick?